The Long Road to True Happiness by WierdRandomTina. Chapter 2. A Different Perspective. The following day, Branch headed out to collect more supplies. He was half hoping to see Poppy, and half hoping to avoid her, still trying to think of a way to thank her while considering not to bother. She seldom ventured this far from the village, so it was unlikely that he would come across her either way. Meanwhile, for the first time in a long time, Poppy was, in fact, in that neck of the woods. She and her main group of friends were planning a surprise party for their tiny but tough friend Smidge, and the princess wanted to collect some special flowers for her. The only problem with that was that these particular flowers were rather difficult to find, and grew outside of the village. Poppy was ecstatic to finally find a patch of them, less ecstatic to find that they were growing high up on a precarious cliffside. But the ever-optimistic princess convinced herself that she could get to them no problem, reminding herself that she was doing this for her best friend for extra motivation. Climbing up as close as she could to the flower patch, Poppy steadied herself with her hands and feet, preparing to reach for them. But as she extended her magenta hair, she lost her balance. Without anything to securely grab onto, she tumbled down the steep hill. Just before hitting the ground, Poppy let out a screech of pain as her forearm scraped harshly against a sharp rock jutting out. Nearby, Branch was picking up some twigs and vines when he heard a cry of distress. His heart dropped into his stomach as he recognized the voice. He immediately dropped his supplies and bolted through the bushes. Bursting through the brush, he found the princess half sitting, half lying on the ground on the other side of a sandy clearing, at the base of a cliff. Poppy looked up at the sound of someone approaching, and was stunned to see grey skin, black hair, a green vest and patched brown shorts appear. Within 2 seconds, Branch had crossed the clearing and was standing in front of her, frantically asking if she was all right and what happened, and if something had attacked her. He saw that she was covered in dirt smudges from head to toe, and her little blue dress was ripped in places. Still recovering from the dizzying fall, and now trying to adjust to a non-gloomy Branch who had appeared out of nowhere, Poppy struggled for words. Yeah, I'm okay. I was climbing up there and I slipped. She flinched as she put pressure on her injured arm and rotated it to investigate the damage. Her eyes widened at the bloody sight. She hadn't expected it to be that bad. Branch's eyes widened even more than hers at the ragged scrape that took up much of her tiny pink forearm. What in the name of Troll were you climbing up there for? Poppy spoke meekly, in pain, and shrinking away from the grey troll's outburst. I was trying to reach those little periwinkle flowers for party decoration. Seriously? You don't have enough stupid decorations in the village? Branch ranted as he whipped out his backpack and began roughly rummaging through it. You have to come all the way out in the middle of nowhere to break your neck for a couple of useless plants? Poppy was taken aback. She was used to seeing him cranky or exasperated, but never downright furious. I was trying to do something special for my friend. Jeez, he has always had to blow up at the tiniest little thing. I thought I could make it. Branch grumbled something under his breath, but didn't lecture her any further. Poppy watched curiously as he pulled out a flask of water, a small jar of something that was off-green, and a roll of bandages. Settling himself beside her, he held out her injured arm. Hold still. After thoroughly cleaning out the scrape, he reached for the small jar. This will help reduce the pain, prevent infection, and speed up the healing. Be prepared, it's going to sting. Despite the strong sting, Poppy hardly flinched. She was too hypnotized by how incredibly gentle Branch was being. He always acted so gruff and cold. She couldn't imagine him any other way. Yet here he was, washing the scrape so carefully and applying the ointment so softly, not roughly or quickly out of annoyance, as she would have expected based on his anger from a few seconds ago. As he adjusted the angle of her arm to bandage it up, and still being extremely tender with both gestures, Poppy focused on Branch's eyes, and saw not only concentration, but also concern. Instantly, her irritation at his yelling faded, realizing that it was his way of expressing that he had been worried about her. In addition, she realized he was right. She could have been seriously hurt, unable to make it back to the village, without him or anyone else around her to help her. And then what would have happened to her? Then another thought hit her. Wait, Branch was worried about me? If it weren't for his concern on her well-being and his ability to maintain a rock-hard focus, Branch would have easily become distracted by the princess's shimmering gaze burning into him, in addition to the fact that he had never been this close to her for so long. But there was one thing about Poppy that was catching Branch's attention and making him uneasy. Her silence. He had always found her endlessly cheery chit-chat irritating, but now that she had been quiet for noticeably longer than half a minute, it was becoming very unsettling. What if she was more injured than they both thought? After the bandages were wrapped tight, enough to function properly, but not enough to be uncomfortable for her, Branch asked her solemnly, "Are you hurt anywhere else?" "No, I don't think so." But he checked for himself anyway, particularly her head. After a thorough inspection, he concluded that there was no apparent injuries. To be certain, he needed to observe her eyes. So he cupped her hand onto her jaw and made her face him directly. Thankfully, her fuchsia eyes looked normal too. They were bright and focused, and absolutely gorgeous. Poppy stared back at him, awestruck that such a dull grey eyes could look so warm. She had never been this close face to face with him, never noticed the slight tinge of light blue in his irises. Abruptly, Branch wrenched himself away from her. As he grabbed his backpack, he instructed bluntly, "Take the supplies. Make sure you get them changed twice a day for the next 2 weeks. Go to the nurse if you get a headache, dizziness, or any other symptoms." Leaving her the small jar and the bandages, he picked up the remainder of his supplies. Poppy was still seated dazedly in the dirt, so Branch offered her a hand. She blinked a couple of times before reaching up with her good arm. As soon as she was on her feet, he let go and turned to leave. But when she gave him a heartful "Thank you," he paused. The pure affection in her soft voice sent a shiver up Branch's spine. "Don't mention it," he said simply, without turning around. "Just be more careful next time." He started to walk away, then paused again, but still didn't turn to face her. Poppy tilted her head curiously. Was he going to say something else? Before she could question him, Branch stretched out his hair and started climbing swiftly up the rocky cliffside, much more skillfully than she had. He snatched a bunch of the periwinkle flowers with part of his hair, transferring them into his hand, and then nimbly made his way back down to the ground. He looked almost awkward as he stepped towards her, staring off to the side as he held out his arm stiffly. "Here, take them." Time seemed to slow down as Poppy stepped forward and reached for the flowers. Branch tried to ignore the way her hands brushed over his own. He finished with a muttered, "Think of it as repayment for the treats." He then left without another word, and without looking back. Even once he disappeared into the forest, Poppy stared after him, trying to process what the hell had just happened. Of course, when she finally arrived at the party location after cleaning up and changing clothes, her friends, Softy Biggie, Goofy Cooper, Fashionista twins Satin and Chenille, egotistic Guy Diamond, and cool DJ Suki, saw her bandaged forearm and asked what had happened. Still rather stunned about the whole incident, Poppy loosely explained, "Oh, don't worry, it's no big deal. I just fell when I was out in the woods. Clumsy me. But it's just a scrape. It'll be fine. And, well, Branch happened to be nearby, and he went out of his way to help me." Her 6 best friends were all surprised, as she had had the concept of the unfriendly, colourless loner assisting someone. But the gang shrugged it off, and after triple checking that their princess and close friend was okay, the atmosphere quickly shifted back into party mode. But unlike the snack pack, Poppy couldn't just set aside Branch's unexpected act of kindness. They had not been there to see the warmth in his eyes, or feel his soft, caring touch. Not that it would have mattered, though, since none of them shared her optimism towards Branch ever changing for the better. There were moments that she wondered if she had indeed hit her head, and somehow imagined his compassion. No, Poppy knew in her heart that it had been real. And it confirmed, without a doubt, that there was so much more to him than she or anyone else could have thought. Branch wasn't a bad troll. He was just misunderstood. Troubled. He didn't have to run to her aid and tend to her injury. He didn't have to be so gentle and concerned. He didn't have to help her stand up. And he certainly didn't have to go up the dangerous cliff to get her those flowers. That kind-hearted troll had to be the real Branch, buried under all of his negativity. He was so full of mystery, even more so now that Poppy had witnessed a completely different side to him. And she was desperate to learn more. That evening after the party, Smidge loved the flowers, but Poppy tactfully avoided mentioning to anyone that they were the reason for her injury. The princess headed home to her large, vibrant magenta pod, hung in the centre of the colourful village above a patch of giant mushrooms. Halfway through scrapbooking the events of the day, a light knock on her door jolted her out of her concentration. Her heart skipped a beat when said door opened to reveal a handsome lavender troll with an orange nose, dense white freckles, striking blue and green hair, and yellow pants. Poppy hadn't seen Creek all day, so she ran over to greet him with a big bear hug. He had heard about her accident, and headed over once his yoga class was finished to see if she was all right. "Don't worry, Creek, I'm totally fine. Branch was in the forest where I fell, and he fixed me up. See?" But Creek eyed her bandaged arm very disbelievingly. "That miserable hermit actually did something beneficial? Huh!" He let out a raw chuckle. Poppy got a bit defensive at that. "Branch isn't miserable. I mean, sure, he's not cheerful or social or anything, but he can be really nice when he wants to be." "Did you hit your head in the fall too, Princess?" Creek looked more amused than concerned. "No! You know what? Never mind." Poppy was getting mildly irritated, and really didn't want to feel that way towards her closest friend. "Since you're here, would you mind giving me a hand with these bandages? I need to change them." Creek obliged, returning to his usual charming tone, and gave her a boop on the nose. But after Poppy washed the scrape, when she opened up the jar of pale greenish ointment, his dark blue, thick eyebrows raised questioningly again. "What in the good hare's name is that?" "I don't know exactly. Some kind of ointment. Branch said it would help me heal better," Poppy explained casually. Creek wasn't convinced. "Are you certain this strange concoction won't do you more harm?" Poppy was shocked by his accusation. "Why would he give me something to hurt me? He went out of his way to help me." She thought again of Branch's genuine compassion, but she didn't bother saying that out loud. Creek merely shrugged. "All right. I trust your judgment, Princess." After she applied the ointment, as Branch had, she handed Creek the roll of bandages. Although his touch was also very gentle, it somehow wasn't the same as Branch's, and he struggled a bit to wrap them up properly. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. Okay, so a bit of a dramatic moment that, but it's like a big shock to the system, and she's just like, oh, that's the real him. And him just like instinctually running to her side and making sure she's okay. The thing about Creek, even if in this he doesn't betray her in this way that he did in the movie, I see it as the difference between sincerity and flattery. Branch is sincere even when he is grouchy, but Creek is all flattery. And flattery might be, well, flattering at first, because it's positive. It's a positive reinforcement. But the thing with flattery is that you only flatter people if you want something from them. Branch doesn't want that from Poppy in that way. He is genuinely infatuated with her, as we've seen. But it's more a matter of actual caring. You know, he likes her. Even if he's irritated by her, he still likes her. Even if he's very bad at showing it. But this is one of the first overt times he's ever openly shown it. And that's what I think this is. When the chips are down, he's there. But notice that Creek didn't come to check on her after hearing that she was injured until after his yoga class was done. If the person that I genuinely loved, I I'm not going to say if I'm in a relationship or not. But if they were, I would drop everything and run. You know, I wouldn't wait 1 second. I'd go as quickly as I could. And that's the critical difference, I think. He thinks of himself finishing the class rather than think of her. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, whatever time zone you're in. Bye, guys, girls, and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.